1939, the Germans invaded Poland.
The Germans came and everything that we knew changed over.
They liquidated, they killed 11 million people.
We felt we are liberated. What was waiting us, we didn't know.
We're going to America. They picked Memphis for me.
Would we have known how hard the beginning would be, we would have never made the journey.
I had a dream, and that dream was in English. And that's when I knew I was American.
A story of the human spirit. That is how director Wahid Al-Khwarizmi describes his documentary, Lives Restarted. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of GHS-TV's award-winning talk show, Crosstalk. I'm your host, Sarah Mayers. Each week in this time slot, we take a look at different issues, personalities, and events that affect you and our community. The film Lives Restarted is about the millions of people who suffered during the Holocaust. However, this is not your typical Holocaust film. Joining us today is the brain behind this beautiful film, director Wahid Al-Khwarizmi. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Mr. Al-Khwarizmi, most Holocaust films focus on the rise of Hitler, but you chose a different focus for the film.
Yeah, there's too many stories of atrocities that happened during World War II, and a lot of them have been covered in various documentaries and various movies, and I thought a really interesting perspective would be to see the journey of the survivors and the struggle they had to do after the war, immigrating to a new country, learning a new language, rebuilding their entire lives from scratch.
Well, how did the focus of the film come about?
There's a community focus group here called the Jewish Community Partners, and they came up with the idea of preserving some history of the survivors living in Memphis, Tennessee. And the idea of the film developed from that. And so we decided to come together and interview some of the survivors about their journey and their struggles coming here.
Well, the film is pretty new. What kind of feedback have you gotten so far?
What I got so far is just how shocked some of the immediate relatives of the survivors are about some of the stories they've never heard of before. For some of them, living comfortably, having AC and having money and being able to speak English, they just couldn't relate. They didn't know that their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents went through the struggle of coming here with no money and no language and having to start everything all over. And so it's been pretty interesting to see the reaction from the immediate relatives of the survivors in the documentary and the second-generation survivors in the documentary and what their feedback is like.
What was it like meeting the survivors and the second-generation survivors and learning about their past and their struggles?
You can't put that stuff in words. There's an emotional connection that happens that you just cannot really describe. To be able to hear them speak about the atrocities that they witness and how they overcome all that makes you personally just believe that you're bigger than most of your small problems, like my phone is not charging fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, the documentary was originally only supposed to be about 5 minutes, but it's actually 40 minutes. What changed during the editing process?
So what we come to find out was this. Most of all the survivors had such intriguing stories and such amazing survivor tales that we didn't think it would do them justice just to do a highlight reel. We had to let them express their voice. We had to let them talk about what they saw and how they overcome it.
Well, you're also an immigrant. You're from Jordan. Can you talk about your past and coming to America?
Yeah, I grew up in Jordan. I was born and raised there until I was 13, and it was actually pretty shocking for me when I came to the United States. I did not know about the Holocaust. The curriculum there did not teach us about the Holocaust. They taught us about World War II, but at the time, back in 1999, 2000, they did not teach the Holocaust. And so when I came here, and my film and video professor here in Germantown High School actually showed us a film about World War II, and I was shocked that we were never taught about these atrocities. And I thought that one day, if I ever become a filmmaker, that's a topic I want to explore and try to get people to come together to understand the past history.
Well, you said that you wanted to explore and you became a filmmaker, and now you are a filmmaker. What was it like making a movie about this?
To me, it was a closing a full circle. To me, it was really just redeeming to be able to explore this topic from my point of view as an immigrant, but then also from just giving back to the community that has helped me so much.
Can you give us a more in-depth look about what it was like behind the scenes for filming interviews?
Yeah, I mean, we actually pre-interviewed most of all the survivors before we did the actual interviews. I did about 2.5, 3 months research on each survivor individually and figuring out how we're going to weave the whole story together, because there were different chapters. There were, the growing up in Germany or around Germany before the Nazis took over, then when the Nazis took over, and then living through the atrocities and then coming here. And so it was very intricate to be able to just weave the entire storyline together. And so we ended up building the set where we did the interviews on, and the reason we did do that specifically was to kind of give it a monument feel, to give the survivors a feel like they are giving a legacy out to the audience by talking about the atrocities and the journey of them coming here.
The full title of the film is Lives Restarted, Stories of Courage and Resilience. How did you come up with the title?
Through about 400 emails back and forth between Jerry and I. We came up with the titles because we had to explore a title that can relate to what the message is of the story, and we thought that that was the best.
Well, where do you see the film going from here? Do you see it going into film festivals or for schools?
Well, currently we're doing a film festival circuit with the film. The purpose of this film is for educational purposes. I want people that, in my opinion, have not had the chance to study this correctly to be able to see it from the vantage point of the survivors. And I would like people to be educated about what happened during the Holocaust, and then also just the immigrant journey to come to America. That's a big part of their lives that I think a lot of people ought to see, especially kids that may not come from an affluent background. To be able to see someone going through those atrocities and then rebuilding their lives and becoming successful, I think it's very important to have that role model.
Well, you want it to go into classrooms, you said. So where do you go from here to get it into classrooms?
Well, we're going to partner up with many different organizations. One of them is Facing History, and they will provide it to different classrooms and different avenues around the nation.
Well, what would you say has been the most memorable part of making this film?
Meeting and conducting interviews with the survivors. I mean, all of them are just incredible human beings that, you learn so much from just talking to them.
Mm-hmm. What was it like finding the survivors?
Well, I didn't have to do much digging to find the survivors. The Jewish community partners here are excellent in staying in touch with a lot of survivors, having that network, being able to talk to them and convince them that, this is a project that's worthwhile doing because of legacy, and this is and that is. And so they've been great in helping us get all the survivors for the documentary.
Well, just one last question. You still have hours of footage. Would you ever reconsider making another film?
Yeah, I think in the near future we may end up doing a feature version of the documentary to where it explores a little bit more of the story and tells some other stories that we were not able to put into the 38-minute version. Well,
thank you so much for coming on our show today, Mr. Al-Khwarizmi, and giving us an inside look about what went on with your film.
Thanks for having me.
Here now is an extended look at Lives Restarted.
A soldier with a pelerin came into the camp and started screaming in Yiddish, "Ihr seid frei, you are free."
She is liberated by the Swedish Red Cross. She weighed all of 88 pounds at the end of the war at that particular time.
The Russians came and liberated us in August of 1944. The war was still going on. The Russians drafted all the partisans into the Red Army and marched them off to the front. Half of those who survived the war didn't survive the Russian army.
And our soldiers rocking back and forth with a rifle. So we raised our hand over there, we dragged ourselves across the road, and the soldier fought to us, "Let your hands down, let your hands down." Well, what the hands down, then when he turns around back and forth, I notice on his lap over here that every time I think about it, I notice American insignia, and I knew then I was freed by the American.
Well, there's no way to describe it, how we felt. We felt we are liberated. What was waiting us, we didn't know.
Everyone after the war would go back to your small town to see who survived.
And then they sent me home. There wasn't a home to go to.
When we returned, everything was looted, all the houses were destroyed. People from nearby villages came and took out everything.
But we came home. And then we start a new life, thinking that we are going to be living in a free country. Unfortunately, the communists took over.
Polish underground dissenters came into our apartment, lined us up against the wall, shot over our heads, and said, Židi do Palestini, means Jews go to Palestine.
The United Nations Relief Agency that dealt with the big question, what are we going to do with the survivors of the concentration camps now that the camps are being liquidated?
They went to the Federation office. That day they put them on a train to Vienna. They lived in this school, in this displaced persons camp, which was the school for about 5 years.
And we always thought that when we heard the term DP camp, we envisioned tents and, sparse land. Apparently they, put 40 people in one room and 30 people in another, and they just held them there until the families could get out or figure out where they were going to next.
People trying to make a family again. They didn't have a family.
DP camp was big on training the survivors on skills like how to be printers, how to repair gasoline engines.
In the displacement camp, they had nothing. And so what they did, their friends in the barracks took the curtains down, and they were, my mom said, horrendous looking curtains. And she made a dress for herself, and they put curtains over a box, and they all put their food rations together and made a meal. And a rabbi in the barracks married them.
My grandfather, tried just selling anything he could to make some money, doing anything he could. He did trade on the black market in Vienna as well. They had to make money. He would buy it for 10 lei, and he would sell oil for 20 lei. He would buy cigarettes, he would sell cigarettes. Whatever he could do to get money.
We had 2 small children. As soon as we had the children, we realized that remaining in Romania, it's a dead end, and we have to do everything possible to leave the country and give a chance to the children, and of course to us, to live in the free world.
And come about the early 50s, I believe my mother said to my dad, Europe isn't the place for us. There are too many bad things that happen to Jews here, and I don't think we should stay here.
And their biggest fear was that they weren't going to get to America or to Israel or to anyone else, and that they were going to have to live in the countries or around the country of where they had just been abused so badly and lost all their family.
My grandmother, before the war, lived in Palestine. She lived in Jerusalem. I wanted to go to Jerusalem. Nothing. But the English then did not let the Jews in. No country let the Jews in.
It became illegal to get out of the country, so at the first opportunity to get out of the country, we did it for our children.
My father stayed at the camp, and then he wanted to come to the United States. At that time, the immigration quotas were very strict for European Jews wanting to come into America.
The floodgates didn't open right after World War II, like I think a lot of people believe. From 1924 until the late 1940s, we had a system that was a reaction. It was really an anti-immigrant reaction that essentially ended most Jewish and Italian immigration to the U.S. Those quotas were still in effect after the war. During the 1930s, it's the reason why most Jews weren't able to get visas to come to the United States. And even after the war, when people were desperate to get to the United States, there was worry that Jewish immigrants were spies. And that was a reason that was offered fairly frequently by members of Congress of why they were not going to open the doors.
One morning, I see a registration on the United Nations Relief Fund. I said, what's going on over here? What's the registration about? He said, they register people to go to America. Lady said, I go home, I tell my wife, we're going to America. What do you got in America? You don't have nobody in America.
She had an aunt who had immigrated to the U.S. before the war. She contacted her aunt, and her aunt agreed to sponsor her. Her aunt had to prove what her net worth was, that my mother would have a job when she got there, all those kinds of things. But unlike some of these other folks that came to Memphis, she went to Atlanta.
I got a letter from America. A lady who I thought was long time dead wrote to me and said, I am your Aunt Tilly. I will bring you to America.
We went to Rome, where we waited for the American visa.
In Italy, the organization named HIAS took care of us. They gave us a place where to stay and to be able to eat. We could not work. We had to be very, very careful with every penny that we spent because we did not have the money.
In Munich, they told me, you're going to Memphis. Memphis? Why Memphis? Never heard of it. Why Memphis? He said, you are a furniture finisher. And in Memphis is a furniture factory over here. So that's why they picked for me to come to Memphis. I go to a map, I look, I can't find, oh, I seen Memphis right here near the Mississippi. Oh, Mississippi, they picking cotton. What will I do over there? Well, anyhow, America, I wanted to go to Chicago, I wanted to go to Hollywood, to go to New York. They picked Memphis for me. But to get out of Germany, I went. We were loaded on the General Taylor ship. We came by ship for 2 weeks to New Orleans.
The seas were very rough, and very few people came through New Orleans. Most of the boats that came through from Europe went to New York. And of course, first thing they saw was the Statue of Liberty.
My mother says she kissed the ground she walked on, just kissed the ground as soon as she got here, and just tried to have a positive feeling that this is America, this is a free country, and we're going to be able to start all over and build a life.
That was a look at the powerful new documentary, Lives Restarted. We are honored to have with us on set today one of the survivors featured in the documentary, Mr. Ted Weinstein. Joining him is the CEO of the Jewish Community Partners, Ms. Laura Linder. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. Mr. Weinstein, tell us about what it was like coming to the United States.
I was in a DP camp in Austria, in the Austrian Alps, and I was 16 years old, and I get a letter from a lady who says she is my Aunt Tilly. I says, now wait a minute, my Aunt Tilly died. I know she got killed because I knew who survived from that concentration camp. I said, something is wrong. And she proceeds to get me papers and find relatives who would vouch for me. And next thing I know, I ended up getting papers to come to America. Finally, after a long boat trip, I came to New York, and this little white-haired, fancy-dressed little lady with a fancy hairdo picks me up at the boat, and she says she's my Aunt Tilly. I said, no way, I remember my Aunt Tilly. Something is awfully wrong. I'm going to be an imposter. What am I going to do in New York? I don't know anybody. Have not heard from anybody. And she takes me home and she gives me a room. I get up in the morning and she says, come on, I'll fix you breakfast. And she fixed me breakfast, and I look out. She lived on the second floor, and she was sitting on the ledge of the window hanging out clothes on a wire. And I looked at the clothesline, and all her clothes was marked Hotel Gayoso. I said, that's my people. I don't have anything to worry about. That was my coming to America.
You know, the film has many emotional and meaningful moments because we were able to include stories from survivors, including Mr. Weinstein. And there's one moment, and I would love if you would share it. The story that you told about when you realized that you were an American.
Oh, that was much later. I wrote a letter to my uncle in Memphis, and he said, forget about being in New York, come down south. And that's how I came to Memphis. Went to Memphis State, graduated, finally got drafted, and lo and behold, the Marine Corps got me. It was a big surprise to me. Scary as hell. I went through Parris Island without any problems because I had a military background. You know, I knew how to march, I knew how to shoot, you know. In fact, I was the platoon leader. Ended up with the United States Marine Corps. The story about waking up, when I was already at my regular base, I woke up one morning and I said, my God, I had a funny dream. The dream was okay, but surprisingly, it was not in Yiddish anymore, it was in English. I'm an American now.
Mr. Weinstein, can you tell us about your military experience and background during and after the war?
After the labor camp where I was in was liquidated, where this Aunt Tilly died, and so did my parents and my brother and cousins. I ended up with the Russian partisans. I did not own a rifle, and I was only 14 years old, and I even went on patrols when they would give me a rifle to participate in it. Most of the patrols were trying to set traps to German convoys. A German convoy would march on a certain highway or by a certain railroad, and we would try to set a trap for them or to liquidate them. I participated probably in a total of either 7 or 8 assignments like that. Some were successful, most of them were not, because the Russian leadership was very, very poor. Everything they did was backwards. That's my military experience with the partisans.
Mr. Weinstein, what do you think about Lives Restarted?
I didn't think it was important. I thought it was a total waste of time, and I even resented going for the interview at first. But having witnessed it and participated in it, I thought it was a good thing. It gave us an opportunity to tell all the gory details. Some of us have told it in a relaxed manner. The story is hard to tell, and it's harder to listen to. When you have to listen about a boy crawling out of a grave because he was shot by the Germans and not realizing that he was dead. He comes out and walks past the German machine gunner who's taking a break for lunch, and the German machine gunner lets him to go by. The story about my own, about being frostbitten, about going through typhoid fever. Hunger was always a problem. To this day, I'm obsessed with being hungry, which I'm not. Stories like that people don't like to hear. But now it's become incumbent upon me because there's not many of us left. Most of the people that participated in that film were descendants of people who went through Auschwitz and what have you. I did not go through Auschwitz, but I went through a labor camp for 18 months, working on a rock pile. To tell you how it felt to work on a rock pile at age 14, to cut rocks or to throw rocks or to carry rocks, with a German walking around with a whip and swinging at you, you know, at any time, and not feeding you. All those gory details I must tell, but I must have an opportunity to tell it in full and in an organized manner. So what do I think about the film? The film gave a lot of people the opportunity to tell their story. I have a story to tell also, but I was not telling it on the film. And that's why I changed my mind. The film was important.
Ms. Linder, as I said before, you're the CEO of Jewish Community Partners. Can you tell us about your mission and what you do?
Sure. Jewish Community Partners is a management organization of Memphis Jewish Federation and Jewish Foundation of Memphis, which are two long-standing nonprofits in the Memphis community. And our mission is to build and sustain a vibrant Jewish community that is cared for, connected, and engaged in Jewish life.
How are you involved in the making of Lives Restarted?
Memphis Jewish Federation for many, many years has worked with the local Holocaust Memorial Committee. That committee is made up of survivors as well as children and grandchildren of survivors. Memphis has had over 200 survivors living in our community, and every year we commemorate the memory of those that were lost through an annual program called Yom HaShoah. The Yom HaShoah commemoration draws hundreds of community members every year to commemorate and remember the Holocaust. So this year, the committee decided that instead of bringing in a speaker, which we normally have done, that we would make a documentary and celebrate the lives of those families that settled in Memphis. So Jewish community partners facilitated the work that was undertaken by that volunteer committee.
Mr. Weinstein, thank you so much for telling us your story today. And Ms. Leonard, thank you so much for giving us an insight on what the Jewish Community Partners does for our community.
Thank you.
Okay.
Even after the horrible atrocities of the Holocaust, the Jewish community continues to flourish and strengthen here in Memphis and throughout the world. I'd like to thank all of our today's guests for being on the show. Remember, Crosstalk can be seen each week at 9:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Mondays, 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Thursdays, and 7:30 p.m. on Sundays. For more information on our programming, please check us out on the web at GHS-TV.org, where we are streaming live 24 hours a day. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Sarah Mayers. From all of us here at GHS-TV, thank you for watching Crosstalk and hope to see you again soon.